more than being online to be a great online university. It takes time and experience. University of New England pioneered distance education in the 1950s and has been perfecting it ever since. With features like 24/7 tutor access, we're now rated #1 for teaching quality and support, and the only public university in Australia to receive a 5-star rating 14 years running. So, for an expert online education, choose UNE.
Hello, Adrian. Thank you very much for agreeing to be in Law 499. We look forward to hearing your views on law and technology. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay, so my name's Adrian Cartland. I'm a tax lawyer, a principal of Cartland Law. I also build legal artificial intelligence. So I've built my AI Alira, the artificially intelligent legal information research assistant. She has, first of all, I built a tax research program that was used to pass the Adelaide University tax law exam using my girlfriend, who's a speech pathologist with no understanding of tax. Alira beat a paralegal on ABC's AI race. She has powered the world's first law firm without lawyers, which I've been initially in Darwin, and now I've got other locations around the country. We've repurposed her for assisting victims of domestic violence. We have a chatbot platform which is used across a dozen universities, including, I understand, in this course. And I kind of build things that are fun. So, yeah.
Sorry, Bruno. Thank you, Adrian. And yeah, we appreciate, and I was going to mention right at the end, that we will be using your legal chatbot and some of your documentation materials later in the course. So thank you in advance for that. Let me go through some questions which I'm sure our students will be really interested in. The first is, what do you see as the crucial legal issues with the developments and innovations in any of the new technologies?
So in terms of the legal issues, one thing that I like about the common law is that it can evolve. And so just as our Constitution speaks about regulating lighthouses and telegraph poles, and now that covers mobile devices, so too do I think things can properly evolve. And if we look at things from a black letter law and a technical perspective, we can have them evolve to meet our present technologies. So, and in terms of legal issues, I think most of the legal issues come about from a misunderstanding of how certain aspects of technology work. For example, we are prone to think of AI like an artificial human, when of course it is not. So it's a program. And once you think of it as another program, an extension of what a human is doing, these legal issues seem to fall away, and you can deal with them under existing legal principles. I can continue on if you'd like.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, I was going to just probe a bit further. When people have approached you in terms of your legal chatbot, what are some of the legal issues they sort of talk about? You know, is it around intellectual property, or is it around privacy, data? What are those sort of broad topics, without necessarily the detail, that you often have to just walk people through?
That I need to deal with as a technologist who builds things?
Yes, and obviously if you were advising a client accordingly, but yes, particularly.
Well, so I think intellectual property is something that's interesting because I'm not sure why. So as someone who holds most of his wealth in intellectual property, I'm not sure if I conceptually believe in it. Just as a broad concept. So what intellectual property is a government mandated monopoly on use of something, and the idea is that it's supposed to fix a market problem. But I see that it's more problematic than otherwise. So, for example, we're recording this lecture, and there's various rights that I can compel you to use it or not. But ultimately, why? Why should we have that those rights? Now, I can control my intellectual property through just secrecy, and making sure that no one can reverse engineer my code, and also providing a good service. Just as a lawyer might provide a good service to their client, and so therefore people return to them. You don't need to have a monopoly enforcing that. And in fact, something that's a really interesting idea that I came across recently is using the law to fix things. One thing I don't like about technologists often is that there's this Silicon Valley hype where people will say, let's break things. I don't believe in that. I think that we can use the existing law to develop things massively. So my essential premise in when people say, what's the future of law? I say that there's two things. One is that there's going to be less change than you think. We don't need to throw out everything. But two, what this means is that it's going to be quite radical, and that just naturally evolving using our existing laws and principles and understanding will be quite significant. Now, let me give you an example of this. A gentleman who works at Fastcase presently, he thought that it was quite unfair that musicians have been copywriting particular passages, or really not musicians, but in fact, someone will buy all sorts of chord progressions or ancient songs, and then sue new musicians for breaching their intellectual property. And what it does is it leads to a stifling of creativity, because suddenly Kookaburra Sits on the Old Gum Tree is getting royalties from Men at Work's Man Down Under, and you go, well, I don't see how those are they could be possibly related. But so what he did is he created an algorithm that generated billions of musical sequences, and then he put them all in the public domain. So he copyrighted them, and then he's put them out there. And so now, if you were sued, you could say, well, I've heard this. This is where the copyright should resign with this algorithm. So what I love about it is he's using technology. He's using the existing law. He hasn't said, let's throw it all out. And he's doing it for public good. So it was that roundabout way of getting there, rather than someone saying, we need to destroy everything.
No, thank you. That's a great example, and I'm sure some other ones may come up. So that actually leads away to my second question, which is more specific around certain legal issues relating to specific tech. Now, you've mentioned big data, artificial intelligence, and chatbots. Would you like to expand a bit more, because that's somewhere obviously you've done a lot of work in, and so
yeah. So laws relating to big data. So thinking about AI, the thing that we think about in AI, the thing that we misunderstand is that it is a program. It is not a human, and so we shouldn't attempt to regulate it like it is a separate human. So when we go then we can sidestep questions of who is creating this? Because one of the questions that people often get hung up on is, oh, what if a robot creates this? Now, what happens if a robot creates some music? Is it owned by the robot? It's like, no, it's just simply another program. So those questions disappear. The next problem, another problem that I think people have that comes from a misunderstanding of how machine learning works is the idea that we should, and this is actually quite prevalent in Europe, is that we should have explainable artificial intelligence. And that doesn't make any sense. You see, explainable, the idea that AI can be explainable means that you're thinking of AI like it's some kind of scientific experiment, like it's a simple regression. Like, I see these are the factors that smoking causes cancer. Like, we can see a correlation between there, and we can draw a regression and see how those work. That's something that's quite simple. Machine learning doesn't work that way. Well, machine learning is not a science; it's an art. And so you will have a correlate, like, so Facebook will be able to target ads to people specifically, not because of some inherent correlation that it is discovered in a statistically valid way, but because it just works. And so the algorithms train so that they have a particular outcome. But there isn't a necessarily justifiable reason why. So you shouldn't then use that to make judgments. Like, you might say, we should ban smoking. because it causes cancer. You can't draw a causal effect between this Facebook ad, Facebook algorithm points to this person liking this ad. There isn't a causal effect, and so we shouldn't try. You can't explain it. There isn't a black box that you can crack open. You can't look up and say, oh, it decided 1, 2, 3 things. Now, the only way that you can potentially understand that is with another AI to test it and see how does this predict, how does say Facebook's ad prediction algorithm work in these circumstances, and then it can say, what would it achieve. So that's something that I see that the law is totally misunderstanding, like certain regulators, and it's just because they just don't understand how it works. The mischief that they're trying to overcome is delegating decisions to robots rather than humans. But that should be done in a different way. You see, we shouldn't conceive of robots as purely just AI, because we should think of machines as to include obviously programs, but also systems like corporations or bureaucracies. They are effectual machines, and there are a lot of instances where it is not appropriate to have a machine making a decision. In fact, a huge thing, because there are, in my view, 7 things that humans will always be better at than machines. That humans are always better at creativity, morality, advocacy, empathy, judgment, which is what comes into play here, contextual reasoning, and I think I missed one, lateral thinking. So, but for making judgment, you shouldn't delegate things to machines. A machine might be able to go out and find something and then say, like, here's an answer for you in this circumstance. This should happen. But a lot of these tensions can be overcome if you have a more technical understanding of like how these things actually work.
Thank you, Adrian. Some great examples there, and certainly food for thought on those balances. In fact, a few of the different interviewees have mentioned the issue around what computer programs can do and what they can't do. And I've also will be introducing through the lectures some examples of what some of the more sophisticated computers like face recognition that can interpret a frown, sadness, anger, etc., but why it still gets it wrong, or why it can be confused because it's only measuring certain amounts of things. Incredibly sophisticated, but it is limited. And with the humanness actually does pick up some other things. Let me get to more.
Can I interject in there? So it's really important to not think of machines as separate things. So humans and technology are symbiotic. So without machines, 99.9% of humans would die. So while we might think of our houses and our phones and our cars and our roads as being machines, but our food has been genetically altered for tens of thousands of years. We cook on fire, which is sort of a mechanical external stomach. Without our genetically modified food and fire and other things, like I would think that probably almost all humans would die, but probably just 99.99% of them would. Now, the idea that we are not the masters of our domain is terrifying for us. And when we're reminded of it, we try and push back and say no. Like I could dash off into the jungle with a knife, which is a machine, and create fire, which is a machine, and I could escape it. Nor do we like it when we are reminded of this fact by new technology. And so that's why we're particularly afraid of technological changes, because we'll say, oh, look, how I can't get by without my smartphone now. This is so terrible. Technology has changed. It's like, look, you couldn't get by without your car or your horse and carriage or, your plow or your wheat. So, like nothing's changed for 20,000 years. So, don't worry. And the thing is technology is also, it's symbiotic. And so therefore the technium is, would just be inert junk without humans. So it's not like HAL 9000 or the Terminator. It's going, there's a competition between humans and machines. It's like, no, they work together. Like Gary Kasparov, after he was beaten by Deep Blue in in 1997, and he goes, wait a second, this wasn't me being beaten by a computer. This was a team of computer scientists who have a very low level of understanding of chess compared to me, leveraging that ability to work with Deep Blue to then compete at my level. But if I had Deep Blue or these series of algorithms, then I could compete at a much higher level. So the best computer players today are centaur chess players, a human plus a machine. And which is why when Alira passed the Adelaide University tax law exam, I didn't just put an algorithm there to do it. I got my girlfriend, who was a speech pathologist with no understanding of tax whatsoever, to ask those questions of Alira's tax research, and then she used that to pass the exam. And so by having that relationship with humans like always built in, it solves a lot of these problems. And so like what things are inappropriate, what do we do if an algorithm can't do something? It's like, of course, an algorithm shouldn't have to do everything. We should then switch over to the human part of the cyborg, because we're essentially all cyborgs.
Adrian, that's a great illustration, and certainly your video where you show that illustration of the tax exam, I will be putting up as one of the resources, because so people can then in action. Let me ask the last question for today, which is, what do you see is in the next 5 to 10 years, that sort of time frame, what are the biggest sort of legal issues in technology that will be coming in front of either the courts or your clients, or just from your own thinking?
Well, so I would say there hasn't been particular change over the last 20 years in legal tech. Like there was a big change, in the 80s and the 90s, where we got emails and we got like there was sort of new things, but really we're not too much different from besides smartphones, really. But how much have they changed compared to having desk phones? I think the next 2 years will have more change than the last 20. I'm very confident of that. And, because one of the things that we have suffered from is inertia. And I see this, like my greatest opposition is not technologically, it's just a societal inertia to doing things differently. And at the moment, I mean, we're all doing things differently. I'm working from home. You're working from home. We're all chatting on Zoom, and we've all adopted this. So what do I see is going to happen? I think that there will be 24 months of immense change. And so what are the legal issues that have come out with it? I think there's just going to be a struggle for laws to grapple with it. But I think there will be a wholesale rewriting of materials. Let me give you an example. We've been offering free wills to people who are over 70 or healthcare workers, because they're kind of the highest risk of dying from COVID at the moment. But one of the things that we've tried to overcome is, well, how do people sign it? So, like, sure, if they've got family members, if they've got a printer, they can print off the will. So they do it online with Alira, which is great. Then they print it off. They've got family members, they can sign it. That's fine. But what happens if they don't have a printer? Well, maybe we can post it to them. So we've been posting things out to people as just as a free service. And then what happens if they can't go down to the post office and pick it up? And what happens if they don't have anyone in their house because they're in lockdown? They're sick. It's like we can actually generate the will that they want technologically, but it won't be a legal will. They can create an informal will, which will cost them maybe $5,000 to prove as being their formal, as being a will. Because the signature, an electronic signature, even if there's two people viewing it over Zoom like we're chatting now, and which for technological reasons I could guarantee would be much more secure than a wet signature and much harder to do fraud in relation to, is not accepted. Now, I mean, to be honest, that's just ridiculous. It's just a joke, and so there will be that change. Something that's interesting, I think that the biggest I think technology inches things along, and I actually think there will be a wholesale rewriting of ethical rules, not by people like me. Everyone's been expecting technologists to change things. I think that the greatest change in the law over the next 5 to 10 years will come from female practitioners who have a pro bono background. I'm being very specific about this because because it's easy to make broad predictions, but I want to make a very specific prediction. I have seen a number of people, ladies, who have come from a pro bono background, and they're absolutely dedicated to doing good for their clients, and they are frustrated with existing rules. And now I say, like, I rock the boats in changing things, and I have enough disruption in my world. And I go, cool, look, I think I can build things within existing structures. We don't need, I see instead, a class of legal practitioners, probably under 35, who are absolutely frustrated by a lot of inequity that is created by the law and old rules administered by people who are very successful and do well out of the existing regime, and to the detriment of others. And they will these like I said, in my mind, I see them as under 35 females from pro bono backgrounds who will totally rewrite things over the next 5 years.
Wow. Adrian, I think that's a perfect point to end, because that's a real thought-provoking way of looking at things, and I really appreciate your time today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.